So today's session is titled Expanding Horizons with Technology. And again, for those of you just joining, I put a link in the chat to the sign-in sheet. If you do need your pick, the link is there as well. Please make sure you touch base with that. And hopefully by now you're familiar with this whole virtual enter your pick number thing on a Google form. So welcome. My name is Jason Siko. I am an instructional technology consultant here at Wayne Risa. You can see my contact information there. And again, I want to welcome you to this session. As always, even though we're in the third year of the pandemic, unfortunately, just want to briefly go over some video conference norms. We have all of you on mute. You can feel free to come off mute. It's a smaller crowd today, so I'll probably ask a few questions. And if you want to interact, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can always enter in any comments or questions in the chat. Turn off your webcam if you're experiencing delays. As we know, one of the major things that will draw bandwidth in your internet connection is your video. And so if that's giving you problems, just go ahead and turn off your webcam. The other piece is if you're also having technical difficulties, feel free to drop off and rejoin. I will let you into the session. I am not locking it. If you're familiar, if you've attended any of the sessions so far this month, one thing that we've really tried to focus on is thinking about the whole child and not just one aspect of learning. We're really trying to focus on community, healthy, safe practices, and making sure that we're improving both learning and improving health through all the things that you see there on the whole child model. And again, when we talk about this, we talk about the promotion of social, emotional, and academic learning. It is not a fad. It is the substance of education itself. And today's session is really about cracking that problem when students wonder, when am I ever going to use this in real life? And we hear that a lot, and we often try to make sure that what we're teaching our students is relevant to things that they will see, do, hear, learn, participate in after they leave school, be it for the summer, be it for that grade level from elementary to middle to high, or after they graduate high school. So please keep that in mind as we go through today. And again, the topic of this is expanding horizons. And one of the ISTE standards, if you're not familiar with the ISTE standards, they are a list of technological standards for not only students, but educators and leaders as well. And so ISTE Standard 2.4.c states for teachers is that educators use collaborative tools to expand students' authentic real-world learning experiences by engaging virtually with experts, teams, and students locally and globally. And so how do we do that? Well, let's kind of start at the beginning. How many of you have brought in over the pandemic an expert, an author, some authority figure via a video conference? Either a thumbs up, hands up, or an example in the chat. And for those of you listening to the recording, think if you've seen that. If you haven't done one yourself, think about if you've seen another teacher or heard another teacher do that. So we've got a couple hands up. If anybody has any examples of an author or a scientist or any other expert that they've brought in virtually, please take a moment and put it into the chat. Catherine, that's a great idea. Guest readers into my classroom. If you feel free to come off mute and expand. And maybe talk about the grade level or the books you're reading or the types of authors where they are the readers, were they famous people or just local people or just friends and family members? You're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I teach fourth grade here, and during the pandemic, I wanted my students to listen to different readers. So I chose friends from around the country. From Washington to Florida, and they read books like Charlotte's Web, The Legend of Mackinac Island, legends about the Everglades in Florida. So they were able to see different cultural experiences. They were able to see different architecture of homes and hear different people.
That's great. That's an excellent example. And again, it doesn't always have to be an expert or a scientist or the author. It can just be friends. It can be just people from different parts of the country, as you mentioned. You know, potentially you see the houses they live in. If they're in warmer climates, you could maybe hear an accent if they're from a different region of the country. And you know, by the same token, somebody during the pandemic could have brought us in and heard our nasally Midwestern accent or anything like that. So even just something small like that is something to just crack the shell and say, hey, you know, there are other people in the world and they have similarities and differences to us. And that's a great experience at the fourth grade level or any level for that matter. But really, what we're talking about is group projects and collaborating with people around both inside the classroom but outside the classroom. And I throw this up here to ask, how many of you have seen this in your classroom? And just either a thumbs up or a yes, where you've done a group project and you see one or more of these stereotypes or archetypes in your group settings. I see some thumbs up there. And then the next question, which ones have you been? Please don't all put ones, be honest. Even if you had a good reason to be something other than one. And for those of you who are listening to the recording in the future, just keep in mind that, hey, you know, maybe when we were in high school or middle school, we weren't the best of students. And, you know, maybe when we became teachers, we tended to appreciate or try to address those issues because we did see them firsthand or were those types of group members back in then. So, and for those of you watching the recording, I can't show a recording of the chat, but everyone is putting one. So of course, we're all good teachers and we were all great students, of course, all the time. Anyone tell the truth here? No, I'm just kidding. But no, realize I was probably that person too. But the last question on the slide is also very important as we talk about you know, group work is if the content of the project was top notch, did you give a high grade? And then did everyone get the same grade if you saw group dynamics like this? And thank you, Karen, for being honest and saying that you were all four of those at some point. But to the question here, let's say you knew that somebody did 99% of the work and it was very good. What grade did the project get and what grade did each person in the group get? You know, and maybe either come off mute or in the chat talk about ways you either did or did not differentiate scores or grades for various students. And again, for those of you listening to a recording of this in the future, just understand that take a moment, pause, and reflect about these questions in your own practice or in your own experiences as a student or a learner. And so let's take a look at that definition one more time and say, you know, use collaborative tools and engage with experts virtually, locally, and globally. But the term collaboration is a bit, you know, is it easily understood? The actual term of what does collaboration mean? That would be another question. And I see this Franius, if I pronounce, sorry if I didn't pronounce that right, said, I had them be honest with themselves and each other, and I asked them to grade themselves and their partners. And we'll talk about some strategies related to that and how to accomplish that. But does anybody have a good definition of collaboration they'd like to share, either coming off mute or in the chat? Works well with others, sharing the load. Perfect. Okay. Let's talk about some differences, though, and I'll contrast this working together with a common goal. I see another comment in the chat. Let's contrast this with cooperation. Cooperation is often defined as division of labor. And so if you think about how sometimes students are, and this isn't a bad skill to have, students look at the project, look how they work as a team, both productively and efficiently, and may do division of labor. So, if the project involves, researching a few different things, they might say, you research that, you research this, I'll research that, and then we'll dump it all on a slide deck or whatever collaborative tool they're using, and then we'll present as if we're subject matter experts on those individual parts. Now, they have met all the criteria for the project and all the things that you listed there and all the bullet points, but did they collaborate? And the answer would be, well, they obviously cooperated. They were a smooth running machine in terms of getting the project done before a deadline. But were they collaborative? And I could argue, or we could argue, that that's probably not the case. They were probably more cooperative than collaborative. And thus collaboration is a coordinated, synchronous activity that is a result of continued attempt to construct and maintain a shared conception of the problem. And so the idea here is that they're working together to build and share knowledge. And that's kind of what separates collaboration from cooperation. So when we're talking about collaborative efforts today, we really need to think about how we can ensure a collaborative environment in our classroom before we start talking about broadening our horizons and working with students from other areas. And I might need to stop sharing for a moment because I don't think I collected the right button there. Let me share again. And so one of the things I want to show is a short little video on the 7 keys to creative collaboration. And you can see them listed there, but let's watch a short video on this and explain each of those 7.
We've all had times when group work failed. People missed deadlines, failed to communicate, and didn't learn from mistakes. But chances are you've also been part of a team when you accomplished something epic together that you could have never done on your own. So what makes this creative collaboration work effectively? Well, here are 7 ideas. Number 1, ownership. Members need to be empowered from the start. Here they can solve problems, generate ideas, and design systems that lead to success. Number 2, dependability. Creative collaboration requires members to hit their deadlines and develop creative endurance. Number 3, trust. When members trust one another, they work interdependently. Here they genuinely listen to one another and assume the best in each other. Over time, they become transparent and even vulnerable. Number 4, structure. The structure should be loose and flexible, but you need to have structure in creative collaboration. It needs to exist. This is why I love design thinking. It's a flexible framework for getting the most out of the entire creative process. Number 5, a shared vision. I'm not referring here to vision statements that you put on a wall or slap onto a website. I'm thinking more in terms of a sense of direction. It's a shared desire, a goal that you're aiming for, and a picture of what you will produce. Number 6, fun. The best collaborative groups I've been a part of are the ones where you want to be together. They laugh, they play together, and this can actually boost both convergent and divergent thinking. Number 7, candor. This is one of the big takeaways from Creativity Inc., a book by one of the co-founders of Pixar. It's the idea that groups need to be honest about what's working and what's failing. And this honesty allows you to adjust and iterate and ultimately create something awesome.
And so how do we do some of those things? How do we get students to be, to build that trust and have that candor, but also have fun, but not have too much fun that it's disruptive? So some ideas, a lot of times people, and I'm generalizing here, but a lot of times teachers create group projects to say that they are promoting teamwork and collaboration, but really they just want fewer projects to grade. And that's a legitimate answer. I'm not going to question that one bit. But if we're trying to promote these ideals of collaboration, then how can we build that in so it's so we're not getting that cooperative learning where they're just doing division of labor? And there's a couple bullet points here. Create learning activities that are complex. So it forces them to interact with one another. You have to spend some time preparing students to be on a team. That's how you do practice with students how to build norms and how to set goals and how to interact with one another in a way that is constructive, but while not being negative for the most part. So those are things that you want to have to do, that you're going to have to do beforehand. Minimize opportunities for free riding. And that's difficult. There's to say that every student will do an equal amount of work is a fantasy. There will always be students who do a little more work than other people. Maybe some of the tasks you develop just require more work or different types of more work, be it, more creative versus more, maybe some of the redundant work that needs to get done. Build in opportunities for discussion, to actually have them talk and not just go on their own separate ways and pull up, if it's a group of 4, they just get 4 laptops and they sit silently and then maybe talk once or twice in between. Create opportunities or questions, or set up situations where they are forced to interact with one another to solve the problem. And then focus on strengthening and stretching expertise. So give them specific tasks that help them grow as a person, as a leader, as a director, or in some of their areas of weakness. A couple other ones, as mentioned in the chat, giving feedback. And so what are some other things that you might do when you create groups to help facilitate a good group experience? And for those of you listening to the recording in the future, pause the recording and think about a few ways that you would build on this intentionality of project work rather than just giving them a project because you think it's a good idea.
Sorry, Dr. Siko, would you please repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, just what other things have you done to improve group dynamics when you're doing group work in your classes, or if they're working toward a common goal in a group project?
I see. Well, giving each other feedback when they do a presentation, doing something that allows them to express not criticize, but to express their view on the partners or the group work. I think it helps sometimes to know if I need to improve on anything or if they're going in the right direction or something like that.
Exactly. And that takes work. So you can't just say, hey, give each other feedback. You have to kind of, maybe if they're younger, you talk about proper ways to give feedback, and I'm not a big sandwich, fan where you're giving something positive, something that they need to work on and end with something positive. But what types of structure can you give to how they give feedback to one another so group dynamics don't break down or doesn't become personal, because that can really lead to problems in group work. The other thing that you can do is make sure that there are defined roles with a group presentation. I have a couple examples there at the bottom corner of the screen, but it provides opportunity for focused interaction. We're working together, and I have a specific, clearly defined role for the success of this project. It gives an avenue for participation. So everyone has to do something. There is no free riding because you've been assigned a role that's imperative to the successful completion of the project. It strengthens communication skills. So they're talking from their particular lens. I am the researcher. I'm the one who's doing this aspect, and I have to translate what I found in a way that's simple and meaningful to the rest of my group members. Or if I'm the timekeeper, I need to make sure that people are staying on task. If I'm the facilitator, I'm the one who gets communicates when people are getting stuck and try to move things forward. These are all types of things that you want to do. It gives everyone a voice, and it helps disrupt stereotypical and gendered assignments. So one of the things that we often see, unfortunately, is that, a disproportionate amount of girls are tasked with things like recording and note taking, and that's not right. So when you define the roles, you can take that into consideration to make sure that these assignments are not being just self-assigned by the students, or something that they always like, and therefore they're not stretching their abilities, but you're also preventing those gendered stereotypes from taking place. Those are all things you need to consider. So again, you're starting to see that, a group project is a lot harder oftentimes than we play it up to be. And the last thing, and this was mentioned earlier about giving each other self-grade. If we're saying that we want students to collaborate, and we say, this is something that you're going to use it later in life, or we're trying to build these skills, then you need to, by default, give feedback and give opportunities to improve on that. And how do you do that if you just give them a project and you just grade the project, the content of the project, without the context or how they work together? And so here are a couple ways using technology to do so. And again, my mantra is always, if you say you address it, you should assess it. One of the ways is to provide a self or peer assessment, as was mentioned earlier. And that can be, confidential, using something like a Google form, and include an area for comments. And really what you're not trying to do here is look for everyone doing the same amount of work. What you're trying to look for is outliers and discrepancies. So in this particular situation here, it is impossible to give everybody the same percentage of workload, because it has to add up to 100%. And the only way to do that is to do some, 30, 40, 30 would get you 100%. So that would tell you that, you're admitting that not everyone did the same level of work, and that's okay. What you're looking for here is discrepancies. So if you see a 40-40-20 or a 50-40-10, that raises a red flag. The other thing that raises a red flag is people give different results. Usually, as somebody said earlier in the chat, people are honest with themselves. If there was a student who admittedly didn't do as much work as the others, they'll probably do it. But if you see a group where and I'm just using what's on the screen, if somebody did 40-40-30, and then someone else did 10-50-40, you're like, well, wait, they're giving each other lower amounts. Something's not right here. And that can allow you to probe and maybe ask some follow-up questions in the group and give feedback to make sure that it doesn't happen again, or they learn from those things, or kind of flesh out what went wrong with group dynamics. The other thing you can do is, as evidence that they've all contributed equally, or at least tried to, is on Google Docs, you can see version histories, and you can see who contributed and when. And you could see if the project was you had 2 weeks to do the project, and you see students working consistently throughout, that's great. But if you see one person doing all the work, or a large amount of work, if it's due July 30th, let's say, and you see a lot on that page that it says July 29th, 11:55, 11:55, 11:58, 11:59, and you don't see their name anywhere else in the document, you know that they were just adding some things at the last second and weren't really contributing equally. Now, I'm not saying that it wouldn't get a bad grade if everyone did everything at the last minute, but if you see some, again, discrepancies or outliers, that's one way to do that. Another one is to actually have students in Google Docs, or even Word, if you're using Word and comments, is making sure that they keep the comments, making sure that A, they're commenting, so they're talking back and forth one another, providing feedback and collaborating, and B, that everyone is contributing to the growth of whatever thing they're working on. And then even as a lesser level or lower level, if you just want to track who's doing what, have them write things in different font colors or different font sizes or different fonts. And that way you can kind of see who's contributing what to a document, or if they're kind of keeping a running journal about a project, then you can see what they're doing there. So these are just some ways, again, to track. You're not necessarily doing this as a summative, but you're also kind of taking all these different pieces of evidence to sit there and say, hey, this group is working well, and it seems these people are understanding their group dynamics and how to interact collaboratively. Whereas if you start to see, the thing's a hot mess, then you can go in and discuss it with the group, and also provide feedback and kind of get them to work through those problems as a group. And that's the life skill you're trying to achieve with these students, is the fact that they can, if they do have difficulties with group dynamics, how are they working through them to solve them so that they have a good collaborative process. But again, and it's good to set those things early, because if you don't do that, trying to collaborate outside the classroom becomes even more difficult. So you have to set the stage with, can they work well with others? And you have to do that in your classroom and build that within your classroom, and then start to build up, let them work with people in other classrooms locally or globally. And so why should we go global? And I have some bullet points there. We want to show people that differences exist, and that's okay. But we really, when it boils down to it, kids are kids. That's the thing of it. Like, we want people to understand that there are more people in the world than just what they see in school or in their neighborhood, and that they are more alike than they are different. It allows students to learn through inquiry. They get to ask questions of other people around the world. So in the story reading example earlier in the session, you get to ask, well, why is their house like that? Why don't they have shingles? Why do they have, ceramic tiles for roofs? Well, they don't have snow, or those shingles won't crack due to temperature changes. That's why. So it allows them to solve problems, ask questions and learn through inquiry. It allows the students to be the experts. You can't operate two classrooms at the same time, so they're going to have to talk to each other, and the students are going to bring different levels of expertise to one another. Introduce students to careers they never imagined. If you're working with scientists from around the world, if you're in a landlocked area and you're working with an oceanographer as a subject matter expert, they're going to learn about that. And that's not something they can walk down the street to. We're lucky in the Great Lakes. We got water all around us, but we don't have oceans. But imagine in a landlocked state, how that would be to have young children being able to interact and do science, for example, in the ocean with an expert and learn all about that field, so they may explore that in the future. And the other piece here is to teach empathy and understanding. You may see students working with other students in different classrooms around the world, and you might see the conditions in which they live in, and they might in turn do the same toward us. So those are things that you want to look at. You want to look at situations where the students have different living conditions, but you can ask questions about why those things are the way they are, and they can learn to kind of understand that there are different people have different circumstances around the world. So just like you'd want to prepare your students to interact with one another, you definitely want to have your students prepared to interact with students who, quote unquote, aren't like them. And what are some resources to do that? I'm going to back out of the screen share, out of the document at this point. But one of the good tools that is useful for this is the REMC Association 21 Things for Students. And if you go to that website, and I will put that link in the chat, give me a second. The 21 Things as a whole is a very good learning tool for students. It teaches them about technology tools for being a good digital citizen. But one of the ones is global collaboration. And this one in particular is an exercise that they can go through. This is a free resource from the REMC Association of Michigan. And they have different quests that you will, if you will, to where they learn about global collaboration. They learn how to collaborate with other cultures, or give examples of things that you need to research before working with students from a different culture, how to speak out about global issues and gain an understanding of things that are going on at different parts of the world that you need to be aware of, and how to speak out thoughtfully about them. And these all have all the 21 Things for Students have an introduction. They have certain what they call quests that they can do, and then they have some sort of culminating project that a classroom can do to become, fluent in that particular thing. So I'm trying to promote two things here. One specific to this presentation today, the global collaboration quests, but also the 21 things for students as a way to help students build their digital capacity. And you can see the different things there: digital life, digital footprint, cyber safety, fair use and copyright. Those types of things are all part of the 21 things for students. So again, I want to share that resource in this particular one, number 20, but also the 21 things as a whole. But this is a daunting task. Where do you even begin? Has anybody done, and go ahead and come off mute or in the chat, has anybody done a collaborative project with a different school in the state? What about the country? And for those of you listening to the recording, think about anything you've seen or heard, either that you've done or that you've seen colleagues do. Has anybody had students in interacted globally? Maria, you did pen pals in kindergarten. You might see a similar resource that we'll show in a bit here, but that's great. You had students write to different kindergartners in different parts of the world, or was it just locally?
It was local. It was just partnering with another school in another city. That was a while ago, so I don't recall the name of the school. But the kindergartners were writing letters to another kindergarten class. It was fun.
Excellent. And so, think about when you're trying to do some sort of global collaborative endeavor. ISTE and a few others provide some steps that might get you started. And even though you want to get student interest, you really have to have a passion for it. It's something that you would definitely have a passion for first. So, for example, I'm a former biology teacher, so I would have a vested interest in looking at maybe some biological phenomenon that is different in different parts of the world. So, rainfall, water quality, climate. What could we do to potentially collaborate with a school in a different part of the state or country or world on any of those biology topics? But for elementary teachers, think about your passion. And if you have a passion for reading, or if you have a passion for social studies or civics, those are things that you kind of want to start with because you're the one building this, so you should have a vested interest in this as well. Pick a focus, and that's really kind of more like a content area. Starting off, you're not going to want to make some huge interdisciplinary project, but pick a content area, one of the 4 cores or your specials, and that's where you're going to center it on. Check in with students. As I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that that the students are ready. Are they good collaborators? Can they interact with successfully with students in their own class? And then do they have the necessary skills to potentially interact with students from different parts outside their classroom? Find your people. This is where you bring in the internet, Twitter, Facebook, Google. You look for people who do this on a regular basis and find groups of people who do collaborative exercises and latch onto them, or even find a few hashtags on social media to follow to kind of build up your confidence and dream a little. This is a project that you might want to use more often than just once, but you want to take baby steps. And then one of the things I would recommend is start with something that you're unhappy with, that you're going to fix anyway. So if there's something in your curriculum that never seems to go well, the kids aren't really into it, or they don't do well on the assessments, this might be an area for revision to either increase that motivation or that engagement, or just refresh the curriculum and try something different because what you're currently doing isn't working. So think about those things as you're thinking about developing a potential global project to do with your students, and let go. It's going to be messy. It's going to be probably not the smoothest thing you've done the first time you do it, but you just have to believe that it's going to work in the end, or it will be at least a rewarding experience for everyone there. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples and talk about some things that you might not be aware of. And again, all these links will be I'll put them in the chat, but also in the slide deck, which I'll give the link to at the end of the presentation today. So one of these is called Global Read Aloud. And as was mentioned earlier, sometimes just getting somebody other than the teacher reading to people can be beneficial. So I'm going to put a link in the chat to Global Read Aloud, and then we'll take a look at that one. And again, all the information there, it's pretty simple. We pick a book to read aloud to students during a set 6-week period. It usually happens in October and runs through mid-November. You can set up for blog updates, but this is pretty cut and dry what you do. But then also, this is something that's coming up in the next couple months or two. I know it's kind of hard to think, hey, it's August. We're on the rounding the final turn in August here. This could be something that you could do right out the gate. And this is something where the site connects authors or participants. So if any of you have written work and want to share it globally, this would be a great opportunity to do so. So Global Read Aloud is one of them. Penpal Schools. Again, we mentioned earlier that having a Penpal would be a way to get students interacting maybe at the earlier grades. But now what you can do is you can center it on a topic. And so what Penpal Schools does is they kind of do a lot of the hard work for you. There are lots of different projects and that are around various topics. And so let's take a look at a few of them. Holidays and festivals of the world. Let's see what this one's about. And so you have a variety of things to do. You have an essential question, and then you've got various options to work with. And then you can build around writing students back and forth. And so you have options here for the teachers to enroll and preview. And to the best of my knowledge, this one is free. It's just kind of setting up the platform for you to get ideas from and also connect you with other schools. Next one is Beluga. Beluga is similar in the sense that it's it creates a bunch of or it has some projects that are customized toward educational goals, but there's action items where they can put their learning to work. But it's not necessarily a quote unquote a pen pal situation. It is more of a project-based organization. And I can't do too much behind the firewall here, but what you can start to see is some ideas that you could take a look at. So conservation action. And you could see here that they talk about a specific ecosystem. And it gives you ideas on how long the lesson might take or the video, the age appropriate. And then if you go through the process, and again, I can't sign up right now, but if you were to take a look at that, they have some follow-up things and maybe some calls to action that you could participate on this project. And again, the other thing is that people from around the world are also joining in, so there's opportunities for collaboration. The pricing I haven't looked at too much, but it is there are free and paid items with this particular website. Teach the Future is another one. Teach the Future is groups of futurists, and futurists are those who explore the future. We talk about history being the past, and we often think, oh, the past is set in stone, and that's what we look at in history books and whatnot. But the flip side of that is, depending on who you talk to, the past can be different. If you listen to, two countries' histories, when they interact, you're going to get different stories. And, again, just look at world wars and read the history books of the winners and the losers and see that they're different or they have different perspectives. The future can be the same way. And so students, Teach the Future allows students to join together on projects that explore possible futures and explore ways to think about different scenarios about how the world will play out. They have lessons, they have hubs that are located around the world. But they also have something called the Young Voices Network, where students from around the world can interact. And so the field of future studies really is about exploring alternative futures and seeing how things that change, what things should we look out for now that could influence the future or shift the future in a certain way. So it's not about predicting the future per se. It's not, it's not Miss Cleo. It's not Ouija board. It's not the psychic. It's more about playing out how the future might be different if there are certain changes that happen today and how those play out long term. The GLOBE program, I point this one out because when I was researching these as well, I had just clicked on the page, and if you notice here, one of the sites that just had some measurements was local. So the GLOBE program, as you can read, it's it's part of the U.S. government. It's a way for students to collect data and share that data globally. And so you're basically doing citizen science at this point. You're having students collect data, and not only that, but analyze the data and have access to the data sets. And you're doing citizen science. You're allowing students to participate in the scientific process. Clicking on that, you can learn about it, how to get trained, how to do it, how to get the data, and see who's doing it, and even just learn about data measurements and data science, which again is a huge booming field right now. If you're familiar with how important computer science is in our education, how we're really trying to promote computer science standards in both our state and in the country. Data science is a segment of that. How do we interpret and analyze data? And in particular, how do we interpret large amounts of data to make informed decisions? And on top of that, how do we visualize that data to make it simple and easy to understand for others? So there's a huge thing here related to data science and collecting scientific measurements with people from all over the globe. The last one here is going to be a little different, and I'll explain in a moment here. The Rouge Education Project is actually put on by Friends of the Rouge. And you can read it there. It's environmental education for middle and high school. And they learn about the Rouge River, which runs through Wayne County, obviously, and perform hands-on scientific exploration of the river on a field trip. So they collect data and, again, share it. I'm going to apologize if the link doesn't work. It wasn't working earlier for some reason. Yeah, it's not working. I apologize for that. The link will work eventually. I think they're just having problems on their end with their web server. So I'll put it in the chat, and it's in the slide deck. But Friends of the Rouge is doing citizen science as well, only on a more local scale. And I mention that because if the whole like interacting with people from different cultures around the globe seems a bit daunting at this point, start small, start local. And as someone mentioned earlier with the read aloud, it's like, oh, I got my friends to read stories. Well, how many of you have friends who teach in other districts? I would assume many of you would raise your hand. Talk to them. Say, hey, can we do something together? It doesn't matter, what you do, but as long as you're doing something to get students to interact and quote unquote collaborate with people outside their classroom, it's going to be interesting for them. And coming up with a different idea for the students to work together with one another would be a great idea. So it could be, for social studies, if you're talking even just in the Wayne County area, we've got election data. We have different districts. We could look at that for social studies purposes. We could look at, again, for social studies, we could look at different policies and ordinances in different cities, and why do they have the things that they do? Those are some high level thinking skills that they would need to have, just as being a future voting citizen. But that would help them to understand, like, well, why does this city have this ordinance and this city doesn't? Why is our election maps shaped the way it is? And what can we learn from there? And you could have students interacting with one another to discuss and dive into those problems and see if there's any problems that need to be solved collaboratively. Again, kids are going to get more into it if there's some new novelty piece there. I'm not a big novelty person for a long period, extended period of time, but if that's the initial hook and the things that can grow from that, if you make those real world authentic problems or topics to discuss, and that can start locally, and that might be easier to do than trying to locate a school halfway around the globe to do that with, when you can maybe able to do it in your own backyard. It's still about expanding horizons outside the four walls of your classroom. And again, as that was mentioned earlier, if you are thinking, smaller, you could think county, you could think state, or you could think country. You don't always have to think globally as a first endeavor, or to think that it's only beneficial if it's global. One thing though that we need to kind of consider if we are doing some sort of external project is, what kind of technology do you have? If you're dealing with somebody across the globe, you're going to need an solid internet connection. Do all your students have computers, or are you trying to do this all on one computer teacher station at the front of the screen? What types of cameras are you going to need? And these are things that are coming down thanks to the pandemic, is maybe we need a whole classroom camera, or one of those 360-degree cameras, so that when you're looking at a class from around the world, or they're looking at you, they can see the whole class. You don't have to sit there and walk around with your webcam on your laptop to get the person who's talking. The same would go for microphones as well. What kind of technology do you have so that classes could interact with one another? And if you're doing any type of data collection, we're not even talking computer technology. It could be just the equipment to collect data, rain gauges, thermometers, those types of things, if you're looking more at science. Along those same lines, though, licenses and platforms. Are you a Google school? Is that other school a Google school? Can they do Google Meets together? Can you do this over a learning management system? Could you set up a Google Classroom for this one project, or this a Penpal project, so you're not physically writing letters and sending them? You just throw them in a Google Classroom set specific, or a unit in your Google Classroom set specifically for that particular project. Social media. This is age dependent, as we'll get to in a second. What types of social media might you use? Would you use some other types of tools like Flipgrid, which would allow for students to record their responses with video and audio, and then could be seen later? Because these are the things that you want to consider as well. What are you allowed to do? You would have to look at what are some of the policies on these types of accounts and social media. Again, time zone differences. If you're working with a class halfway around the world, you're never going to be in class at the same time. So is this something where you'd have to set up a special time? Would you have to do some recordings? Would the students be allowed to interact outside of school hours? That might be part of your internet policy for your acceptable use policy in your district. And would that be allowed? Internet filters. I will tell you that if you have a collaborative space, sometimes districts set up their learning management system so it can't be accessed from international points. Those are things that you would need to kind of consider if you were looking at having some sort of global interaction. How are they going to interact? When are they going to interact? Through what media are they going to interact? And does your district technology policy, or the technology you have, the ecosystem you have, does it support those types of interactions overall? There are a few more here. Again, I'll put that link in the chat. But you could go on and on these, and they're all over the place. So kind of keep that in mind. Like this is just a smattering. I can't really do go through everything here as we wrap up, but I'll put a link to that in the chat, and we can kind of take a quick look at it, but just a few more ideas. Some of these, this article is a little bit older, but some of these are still in existence. Teapot project. It's a math-related project to fit an oddly shaped teapot as it travels to another country. So you're looking at building a container that would fit an oddly shaped box. How would you protect it? Holiday card project. winters around the world. Again, you can see the multidisciplinary pieces here as well. You can start to talk about climate. You start to talk about, how we celebrate the things that go on in the winter besides Christmas, and what are some things that we could do to learn about how other people celebrate winter, or what other events occur in winter, and realize that winter's at different times of the year depending on the hemisphere. So that's another learning opportunity for students as well. And again, the idea here is the whole child. Doing these types of projects, as we conclude today, is all about building that whole child, making them more aware of what goes on in the world around them, not just what happens in their backyard or in their neighborhood or in their school district. And again, you want to start slow. If you're, kind of want to do it in baby steps, then you'd want to make sure that you start with a smaller project. But the larger term goal is to have potentially global projects that take place at regular intervals throughout the K-12 experience. So you have some things that they do at the elementary level. You have some things they do at the middle school level. You have some things that are written in the curriculum at the high school level for courses that all students take. And this helps build global citizens that know how to interact with other cultures, are able to work with people who are different from them. And those are all good skills to build, responsible citizens as we graduate them out of school. So at this point, I want to say thank you for coming. It is approaching 4 o'clock.